Hello, everyone. Today we'll be talking about Stoicism and its conception of God. So let us begin. So here's the first kind of general observation. So the Epicurean piety or conception of piety, much like the Stoic conception of piety, were both different from their kind of traditional background of Greek/Roman polytheistic piety. So they were both kind of in opposition to the mainstream conception of religion and piety, the rightful way of relating to the gods. From the perspective of the common polytheistic piety, the former, namely the Epicurean conception of piety, construed God as much to distance from the physical world, especially the human drama. The God of the Epicureans was not concerned with, was indifferent towards what was happening, for the humans. He didn't care about human affairs. So that was too distant. And the kind of piety that comes out of the conception of God, from the Epicurean conception of God, also felt a little too distant, a little too kind of separated from like the daily works of the physical world. And by contrast, the Stoic felt a little too close. The Stoic conception of God, as we'll see shortly, and the conception of piety that follows feels a little too intertwined with the physical world. So you can think of both Stoic piety and Epicurean piety as two different kind of extremes in this spectrum, and the more kind of commonsensical, popular polytheistic conception of piety and the gods is intertwined, is in the middle between those extremes. So here's the heart of Stoic conception of God and piety that follows from that. The controlling thought of Stoic theology, or stories about the gods, is the identification of God with providence. What is providence? Well, providence is something like the rationality of the natural processes, is the intelligence that is guiding the order in the universe, is the kind of animating principle that gives rise to intelligibility, to being, to rationality, to life, to order, to goodness, into all of that. So here's something that Kenny says: God, according to the Stoics, is material, himself a constituent of the cosmos, fueling it and ordering it from within as a designating fire. God's life is identical with the history of the universe as it evolves and develops. So saying that God is material, I mean, some Stoics did kind of say those things, but that can be very deceptive. Um, to say that for the Stoic God's it's material is not to say that God is like this person sitting in some house somewhere, or like in a tree. So God is not material in the sense in which a tree is material, a book is material, my body is material. God is material merely in the sense that he is a constituent of the material world. And what that means is that, according to the Stoics, God is something like the spirit of the world. And the way they think about it, like the human body is becomes a model. I have a body, right? In some sense, I am this thing, this person that has a body. But I'm not just the body, I'm not just the muscles, I'm not just the bones, I'm not just, the hair and so on. I am the unity, the intelligible unity that comes from those parts, those physical parts. In some sense, my soul, my spirit, is the thing that unites and animates. It makes unity, it makes intelligible this whole thing that is my body. So my spirit animates, brings to life this particular set of material stuff, this body stuff. And it orders it, it structures it, it grounds my personality, it grounds my moral agency and my ability to engage enter into human relationships and so on. It is the spirit that is driving that. It is the spirit that is making my physical part be a person, right? So the person me is the kind of combination of my spirit and my body. And that's pretty much the model that the Aristotelians had. That's the model that the Stoics had. And that is the model that they use for the universe. The way the Stoics think about it, the universe is like one large body like this, right? The universe is alive, much like this person is alive. And it's alive by having two kind of different ingredients come together and form a harmony of sorts. Having the physical stuff that occupies space and time, like the bones, the muscles, the hair, and having the spirit that unites it, that makes it intelligible, that animates it, that brings it into life. It is my spirit that unites with my body that gives rise to me as the person, and the me as the person is the living one. Right? Once I die, the body will be there, the corpse will be there, but it wouldn't be a person, it wouldn't be alive because the spirit will not be there. Um, Stoics think something much like that is happening with the world in general. And God is the spirit, right? The world is what it is, it's alive because God is within it. So God is the underlying principle, the structures, the guides that makes intelligible, that orders all of the natural processes in the world. That doesn't mean that God is everything, like corruption, illnesses, disease, failure, those kind of deficiencies of the natural processes. Those are working kind of in some sense against the will of God, or they're kind of opposing or balancing the good things that God is doing. God is doing the good thing, right? God is doing the organization. God is doing the ordering. The disorder is allowed by God, but it's from a different source. And here's perhaps a more careful way of construing God for the Stoics. God is nature with capital N, and capital N is again the spirit that animates. And put it a bit more carefully, God is the rational, ordering, and animating principle in the physical world. So for the Epicureans, the life of God is a life of detachment, is a life kind of concerned with itself that has no regard with the physical world and our human interactions. For the Stoic, the human life, the divine life involves the human life, or the human life is part of the divine life, because everything that happens in the universe, everything, the life of the universe, um, all of the ingredients in the universe are part of the whole, which is the universe. And the life of the universe is the life of the divine. So God is very intertwined with human affairs. In fact, in some sense, it is human affairs are part of the divine life, because human affairs are kind of animated by the structure, by this underlying spirit that endows anything with everything with life, namely God Himself. Um, so that's the basic picture for the Stoic, and a lot of things are going to follow from the basic conception of God. And one of the cool things that happens is that they put forth a different kind of argument for thinking that God exists. Let's spend a lot of time looking at that. So Epicureans believed in gods on the grounds that there was the widespread testimony of humanity. And if you just say that, you think, "Oh, I believe in God," because most people do. It sounds like a very bad argument. Like, no, like people can be wrong. But it's a better argument. It's not just that. It's not other people do. So I think so as well. The thought is something like, uh, if there is a desire or belief that is widespread in a population, it seems to be kind of by design. It seems that it seems to be a natural desire. And if it's a natural desire, it's implanted by nature. And if it's implanted by nature, it seems that to be implanted by those that design nature, right? So God created nature in such a way that is natural for us to believe in God, right? It just fits well. It's a coherent story. It would be strange if nature imposed these or inculcated these beliefs on God when there is no God, right? There'll be kind of a tension there in nature. Um, so that's not quite what the Stoics said. The Stoics present the following line of thought, and here is something that Cleanthes, a Stoic, says. Anyone entering a house or a gymnasium or a forum and seeing it functioning in good order would know that there was someone in charge. And so think about entering a ruin, right? You enter this very old house that has been abandoned, and you see things are cracking. The plants are growing in different places. A lot of dust has been accumulated, right? You can see that no one has taken care of it for a long time. Then you enter a different house, and it's clean, as well structured, as well kept, and so on. You can see that someone has been keeping up with, right? You can just see the order in the kind of chaos and disorder in the other one. And the point is something like, we can see when there is an underlying agent, intelligent agent that is imposing order, and when that's not the case, and things are just kind of naturally decaying, right? The second law of thermodynamics, things naturally decay. And when things are not naturally decaying and things are in order, we know that there's an active, intelligent person imposing order onto things. So later, people are going to make the argument of a clock. So there's a famous story about someone going into an island and walking on the beach, and then seeing what appears to be a rock in the floor and the sand, and he approaches, picks it up, and it turns out to be a clock. It's a watch, right? It's a hand watch. And then the author thinks, hey, I know something. This the way the clock is organized. It has intricate parts that are made for a function, right? That they have a goal, they have a point. Um, this is not the result of chance. I know that there's a clock maker, perhaps still on the island, but that I found this thing in the island, the clock, means that I have very good evidence. The clock itself is very good evidence that there's a clock maker, someone who's intelligent, who imposed the order, right? This thing wouldn't just come about by chance. That's kind of the thing that the Stoics are saying. If you look at something and it's well ordered and it's well structured, it's working well. You can tell that there's some intelligence behind it. And here's a more kind of nuanced way of putting forth the argument. So here's the Stoic argument for God, for thinking that God exists. Either there's randomness or chance, that is the same thing, or there's order, organization, and intelligibility, right? Those are two options. If there's just chance and randomness, then in the world, if the world is governed by just chance and randomness, then there wouldn't be any meaning, any value, any purpose, or any God. If it's just chaos, if it's just chance, meaning, value, purpose, and God, like those are not the kinds of things that can come out of chaos, right? If the world is chaotic and just chance driven, then there's no meaning, there's no value, there's no purpose, there's no God. If, on the other hand, there is order, there's structure, there's intelligibility, then there is meaning, there's value, there's purpose, and there are gods, right? Those are the only two options. Chaos, no gods, no meaning, no value. Order, meaning, value, gods. Um, and for the Stoics, next step, it is incredible to think, the Stoics believe, that the world as we see it now, with its very complex structure, order, right? So just think of the complexity of a human cell. It's extremely complicated. It's extremely well ordered. And if you think about like the organ that it is a member of, now it's a much more kind of complicated system. And now you think the human body that it's a part of, that's a much more complicated system. And you can keep expanding, right? The human society, or perhaps the ecosystem, and so on. So the world is extremely complicated, and yet it's ordered, right? So the more you know about science, the more kind of impressive it is how complex and ordered complexity governs nature, the physical world. And Stoics will point to those things and say, like, you cannot seriously believe that order complexity came out of chance. In an example that other people use is something like, think of a work of Shakespeare. What is the work of Shakespeare? Well, in the very loose description, is just taking, the letters and throwing them in a particular order, right? It's the order of the letters. But if you find the work of Shakespeare, you're very, justified in believing, oh, there's an author who organized an intelligence that organized these letters in this particular way. If there was just this random mechanism that threw the letters in the random order, it's possible that it would have hit that particular order, that particular play, say Romeo and Juliet. But like, it's unbelievable. Of course, like you shouldn't believe that it was this random machine that just happened to give you a Romeo and Juliet by randomness, right? Like, that's possible. It's one of the many gazillion outputs. But the by far the most reasonable conclusion is no, there's an author, Shakespeare wrote it. An intelligence imposed order onto this thing is not the result of chance. Chance is like a possibility, but it's not a credible possibility given how many options there are. And that's the basic argument that Stoics put forth for God. And for them, it's as straightforward, right? There's order. God just is the principle of order. So the move from there's order and structure in the universe to there's a God is a very, very tight move in the Stoic world. Why? Because God just is the kind of the principle of order. So they get God very straightforwardly. Here's a challenge, though, to theistic belief in general. I mean, like, not Epicurean belief, but most theistic belief. Why there is evil? If there is evil in the system within the world, but doesn't this prove that it's not order after all? And here's the cool Stoic answer that's going to be repeated throughout the centuries. Well, actually, all suffering is ultimately for the good. So if by evil you mean unjustifiable suffering, then there's no such thing. All things that we call evil are the kind of just consequences of some evil thing that someone did, or they're evil people doing bad things, but then they're going to be punished, so they're going to be justice is going to be served, and all suffering, all pain and so on, is ultimately going to give rise to something good, or it's going to be punished such that things are going to be set right. So if evil is unjustifiable suffering or pain, there's no such evil, because all pain and suffering is ultimately justified either by rightful punishment of the perpetrator, or because that thing is connected with something else that is not itself bad. Okay, let's end there. I will see you next time. Bye.